Hi, everyone. This is Avantika Singh from the McKelvey Group. I'm here with Stephanie Alexander from Boost. We're here to record another episode of the Guest Expert Series at TMG. Stephanie works, as I said, at Boost. She's the founder and CEO. And also, she's a partner at GovMates, and she's going to tell us a little bit about that. She also happens to be a fellow Hokie. We did our MBA at Virginia Tech. Yay. I've met her several years ago, and I've worked with her. Great, highly endorsed and recommended professional in our industry. Lots of great insights. So with that, I also want to mention that you're on the board of directors on the SDVOSB Council. So she's very accomplished and well-known professional in the industry. So Stephanie, I want to hand it over to you. Give us a little bit of background on Boost and GovMates.
Thank you so much for that kind intro. First off, go Hokies. Yay. Sorry, can't help myself. Undergrad and grad school, because we, again, can't help ourselves. So I am the founder and CEO of Boost LLC, and we provide back office support to federal contractors. And so what does that really mean? It means that we do the stuff you don't want to, generally. Our services include accounting, contracts, HR, and recruiting. So think of us as kind of a great place to start off if you're a startup, or as you're on the high growth curve, a way to augment your current staffing or corporate team. In addition, I am partners with a good friend of mine, Katie Bialik of RCA, for GovMates, which is an online teaming facilitation platform. We take a very methodical and direct approach to teaming, where GovMates can go online, and that can be anyone in the federal contracting industry, register your company. It's free. That's probably the best part of it. And then we go out to the large guys and say, what's the purple squirrel that you may need? So depending on what NAICS codes or what's core capability, we go off what set-aside status, we go off and find those people, prepare a report for them, show them a list of 20 people that may qualify. They tell us who they'd like to be introduced to. And then from there, we do an email introduction and we're out. We tell people business is still business. You still have to sniff each other out and figure out the best way to strategize on teaming.
Great. Yeah, I mean, that's such a great aspect that you bring to the table, because it feeds into everything, all of the, capture strategies that we have to kind of recommend to our clients, especially on a pricing side. It's great to know that you have this sort of matchmaking service available, and want to get the word out on that, because it's fantastic.
Right. And like I said, the best part about it is, of course, that it is free. Yeah. So the worst thing that could happen is nothing happens. But as you know, pricing is, critical, especially in today's industry in the GovCon environment. So how you price strategy, from who you recruit and how you bring them on board, what letters of intent you have, what salaries you start off as a negotiation base, right? Yeah. How you get those people, how you price it, which, clearly is your area of expertise, and then also who you team with. Is your teaming partner going to be within your range of rates? Are you going to remain competitive? I mean, who's not sat at a red team meeting or, red team review and had last minute proposal or pricing issues where you can't get the wrap under there? So going into a teaming relationship and knowing what sort of wrap rates that you're looking at and what your pricing strategy is critical. Otherwise, you're going to waste a lot of time and effort and B&P dollars that you can't afford to waste.
Right. So I want to focus on one thing you brought up, is recruiting. I mean, you have experts that do that. I also am noticing a trend in the industry where key personnel are very, very critical to submitting even the bid. Do you think there's value in your company coming in and helping firm up the recruiting sales pitch in the cost volume or technical or management volumes? I think there's a huge potential benefit to clients to do that. And what are you noticing? Are you getting brought in at the right times? Are you not getting brought in at the right times? What would you do ideally?
In an ideal world. So I think, first off, you can talk to any BD professional in the federal contracting industry, and they will tell you that their on-staff recruiters are always busy with billable positions. It's billable always comes first, right? Every day they're not in a seat is the day you're not collecting revenue. So proposal recruiting always comes last in terms of the order of priority. It's just the nature of the beast. Right. So the poor BD and capture folks are like, come on, but we need to staff this correctly. And if you're in the services business, your staffing is the vital part of this, right? The staffing goes to, what are your credentials? How are you going to meet the capabilities that the government has asked for? How are you going to exceed their capabilities? And do so with salaries that make sense, that will actually help you on a cost competitive bid.
Yeah.
Every bid
and you
is
can
cost
justify
competitive.
that with your
Exactly.
letters of intent.
So what you want to do is a lot of shops have found that their in-house recruiters are just not going to give it the time and energy, so they will outsource the recruiting function for proposals. Now, doing recruiting for proposals is a bit more like selling air than normal recruiting, because again, you're selling them on the opportunity, on the what if, and if they can actually, if we get through award, if we actually get through best and final, if we get through the protest, if we get to actual, revenue generation, then you'll have the ideal job. But you sell these candidates based on the fact that they are highly credentialed. You want to make sure one of the big things to look out for when you're placing key personnel is how many other companies, if any, have they already signed letters of intent with? Right. Because that's a huge thing, right? You submit a proposal, you've done all this BNP work, you're great, you love the program manager, and then all of a sudden you find out through the back channels that your program manager has been submitted on 3 other bids.
Right.
That's the worst, right? So you put a lot of stock in this person, and so part of it is trying to lock these people down.
Right. And I guess having someone who knows those aspects is critical, to be a part of the capture team. I don't think this is an after-the-fact thing, and I don't think they should bring your services in at the last minute. Oh, my God, it's an emergency. We need 50 resumes because the Q&A just came out, and they're asking for named resumes.
That's the other thing, right, is in a good Q&A, all of a sudden somebody's like, and we wanted to see resumes for every single position.
Right.
Now, there are schools of thought on whether or not you actually provide those. If you download them from LinkedIn or Monster or wherever, and you don't vet them. But I mean, my intent is in the beginning, if you bring in the recruiters for the capture strategy, then you think about what are the credentials that will set us apart? What's our differentiation strategy? Because the people, again, if you are a services company, the people are what is going to be your differentiator. And your people drive the salaries, and the salaries drive your pricing. And that's ultimately where it all comes together.
I agree. One of the challenges that I'm seeing from a pricing perspective is now we're often getting into LPTA bids, even though officially they're not called LPT anymore. There's still this emphasis on price low, right? But then they also want to see total compensation plans that are, promise the Cadillac and, Lexus to your employees. And it would be really good to have this sort of understanding from the recruiting team or an expert like yourself who can ghost some of this stuff.
Exactly. So one of the first things that you use, especially when you're using an outside firm, is who better to go find out what your competition's doing.
Yeah.
It doesn't have your name on it. It doesn't have, we use this using our recruiters, right? So we go out and we look at the job boards. We look at what people are recruiting for. Your competition's recruiting for those positions too. So how are they getting them, and who are they getting, and who's locked up? First, recruiting 101 on a proposal bid. You go look at the org chart, right? Who's the current org chart, and then you go down the list. Yeah. I mean, it's an old tried and true method, but that actually does work. Then you look at the benefit packages that the other companies are offering. Now, I'm not suggesting that you're going to completely change your medical plan based on one RFP or one proposal that you're doing, but if you are not competitive, you're going to have a really hard story to tell in that management plan.
Right. Yeah.
This also goes to retention, right? So the government wants to know that your people are actually going to stay with you. So writing a robust management plan that includes what your entire, all of your benefits packages, not just the boilerplate that you've continued to use for the past 5 years that no one updated, but what are you doing with your employee culture? How are you differentiating yourself in the marketplace, and what are you doing to retain your employees so that they don't have to see all new training, all new people, and rinse and recycle?
I mean, that's a great point, because a lot of times we leave the recruiting plan and the retention plan to the engineers who are writing the tech solution, right? And, they're smart people, and they know, a lot about how to build a rocket, for example, or a ship or a missile system.
Right. But they're not recruiters,
people.
And they're not people.
Right.
Dear God, they're not people, right? So, and that's why you bring the corporate team in, right? Yeah. So it's more than just pricing. If you actually are doing it from a holistic approach, you bring in your HR professionals, you bring in your recruiting professionals, because you want them to touch on each of these bases within your proposal.
Yeah.
And I bet you, I personally believe 9 out of 10 times the competition isn't doing that, right? And that's in a very cutthroat industry where we're very cost conscious. That's something that can make you stand out.
Absolutely. Anything that we can add as a feature but doesn't appear expensive, however, it takes care of the basics. I mean, hire the best people, retain them. This is how we're going to do it. This is the story. Use it as a good story.
Exactly. Create the story, right? Mm-hmm. Having breakfast on Fridays for the team isn't isn't a big deal, isn't a costly benefit, but actually resonates with some people. Right. Bring your dog to work day, bring, all these types of things that, the touchier, feelier side. Right. People like that. And that's why people stay.
I agree, especially with certain agencies who want to see the staff being retained year over year and want to build that institutional, knowledge base, and they don't want to be recruiting every 2 years because people are quitting for better contracts or the competition's offering one more, week of vacation or something.
It's risk aversion, right? So anything you can do to mitigate your risk in front of the government and show that you are the best value, in addition from a cost perspective, but also from a risk mitigation perspective. And it's one more tool in your arsenal.
That's great. I mean, that's exactly kind of the message that I think we need to start shaping in the industry, because it has to be holistic, like you said. We have to make sure that the government is getting a good product and a good contract delivery.
Exactly.
And retention is key. So what I wanted to talk to you about also was, what are the common sort of pitfalls you've seen of people not using smart recruiting, methods, or relying in, waiting until the last minute to submit stuff to the government, or going into an oral presentation without good candidate base, besides the obvious of losing. But if they do win it, despite bad recruiting, proposals.
So I think it depends on what type of contract you're going after. But we've mentioned a couple of the key, things that have happened. You have someone who's a key personnel who's on 3 different proposals, right? And therefore, you've pretty much shot yourself in the foot by taking out the one thing that you were betting was a differentiator. We've also seen people lose based on retention rates and not giving any attention to that aspect of it. And then bringing the other side of that is proposing what you thought was the government's favorite person and finding out that they've been trying to get rid of them for the past 2 years and haven't figured out a way to do it. And so now they want a refresh. Yeah. The government occasionally wants a refresh on their team, right? So knowing the client enough, knowing that, having that backstory, what do they actually want, right? Do they want all new blood in because they need young and want to train them up and get them going? Or do they want the SMEs? Do they want the folks that have been around and have the historical knowledge? Right. You've got to read your client the right way. I'd also say when we talk about teaming, because everything does, in this world, teaming is definitely the way to go, is having a teaming partner that is not in line with your values or your culture. Because if you are telling different stories and you're sending mixed messages, I think it's very transparent to the government. If your benefits are so ridiculously different than the other partners, and that makes for a really bad transition plan, but it doesn't make you seem as if you're on the same team. And I think when you're looking at teaming partners, that's something that you really want to focus on is, do they align with my price structure? Because that's important too. But also, do they align with kind of the values and the culture that we're trying to portray and the value to the client? Because if they think their value is so different than what your value is, that doesn't always align correctly.
Yeah, I mean, that's great, because it actually was, I was going to ask you, what are some of the best industry practices when it comes to teaming approaches that you're witnessing in the last, year or two?
So I think the smart people are playing the field to some extent and starting early. So if you know that procurement's coming out in 18 months or even a year, you need to start thinking about who are the teaming partners that make sense. It is a relationship, is an overused term in this industry, but definitely something that is true. You cannot just suddenly last minute, then weekend before the RFP hits, or even midway through proposal when somebody drops out, just find someone. That is apparent. It's a Band-Aid approach, and you can tell. You need to lock down the team. There's also, some strategy behind locking people in, right? Yeah. Exclusivity or not. Right. And what you do to shore up your team to make sure that you're presenting your best foot in front of the government.
Absolutely. And it works hand in hand with pricing too, because oftentimes the challenge we have is someone gets added to the team late, and we had a certain, approach to getting the bid ready and completing the price, and suddenly everything's thrown into the gutter because now we've got to change the small business plan, and then we've got to change rates for certain positions.
And definitely that happens. And I mean, there's always something that, comes out of nowhere that no one was expecting. And I can tell you that for GovMates, we get a lot of last minute requests for, hey, it was released as an 8A or a HubZone or an STV, and we didn't realize it, or we're not that person. And so we thought we had kind of siphoned it this way, and instead it went a different way, or it went sideways on them. We also get a lot of requests from the large guys where a small business just, fell out. And they fell out, A, because of rates, or B, because of bandwidth, because they didn't have the time to really dedicate to the proposal. And in GovCon, let's face it, they all hit at the same time. Yeah. We know everybody has a crazy summer. Everybody has, there are times in this industry. And I think that's when teaming goes astray. And so industry best practices are to make sure that you have a good teaming partner that you have a solid relationship with, that is going to be there. You do that by developing the relationship. It doesn't happen overnight. And then you also make sure that you've kind of got one of everything. Yeah. So you need an SDV that you're going to team with. You need a woman-owned. You need a hub zone. You need an 8A. You need one of everything just to make sure that you've got the best range in terms of what you're presenting.
That's great, and that's what we recommend too. Partnership is more important than a competency, because once you have the partnership, everything else sort of falls into place over the long term.
It does, and you get to know each other as you work together. You understand work share. There's no fighting on that. You understand rates. You kind of get how you contract with each other. And let's face it, we like working with people we like, right? So if you can build a relationship and you no longer feel like you have to start over every time, that's the easy win solution.
It's like dating.
It is very much like dating, which is how GovMates came about.
Exactly. So I think that's a great service that's available, and I recommend everybody go check out the website. But with that, I think we are at the end of our episode. It was great having you, as usual.
Thank you so much for having me. I appreciate the opportunity.
Absolutely. We'll have you back next time. Thank you.
Thank you.
Silo was good.